Hi everyone, Michelle Lucraft here, also known as Mickey. I thought it was pretty interesting this week that Professor Michelle offered us to do a video for our discussion post. So this is any opportunity I get to do any kind of presentation or video. I always been trying to do it at Bay Path to just really try to work on these skills because it's not that easy to speak in front of a camera. But so I thought I'd jump at that opportunity this week and hopefully you'll like it. Wow, this week we had a lot of reading to do, and I have, like you, probably studied many of these theories before, but I don't think I read that much about the psychologists themselves' lives. I found it to be interesting and inspiring, and some of the ideas that I've thought in the past were very odd, didn't seem so odd to me anymore, and then others actually still just seemed really odd. But I'm looking forward to reading some more biographies on many of the psychologists that I'll continue to study while being in this field. I'm looking forward to really diving in more in depth in my future. I chose Alfred Adler this time, and he was born in Vienna in 1870. He started his career actually in the medical field. He began as an ophthalmologist, eye doctor, then he changed to general medicine. He actually opened up a practice near an amusement park and circus. And while he was practicing his medicine there, he was working with many of the performers, and he actually began to start observing them. He realized he found some really inspiration in their unique strengths and their weaknesses, and many scholars believe that during this time is when he began to develop his ideas of compensation and inferiority. And probably many of you have heard that inferiority complex. That's a pretty pop culture, pop psychology term. He met with Freud in 1907 and he formed a psychoanalytical society with him, but they grew to realize they had too many differences. Well, especially Adler towards Freud himself, and he tried to break away apart from him. And actually continued to try to do that. Like he didn't want to be associated with Freud, even though Freud kind of considered him one of his understudies or whatever. But Adler was always trying to break free from that. I don't know what that thought of him. So Alfred Adler is known for his Adlerian theory, which is also called individual psychology. The premise of this theory is that a person's personality is shaped by their desire for success and an attempt to gain superiority. The way that they perceive the world also shapes their behaviors, and their personality is unique to that individual, and their behavior is trying to align with that behavior, if that makes any sense. Adlerian theory is broken down into 6 principles, and then those 6 principles are broken down even further. But the premise is the basic principles are, and I've seen them called tenets as well when I was doing my research. Um, the first principle is striving for success or superiority, and this would be described as individual's goal, the final goal or the end result of what they'd like to see themselves. The individual may strive for, healthy reasons for this, or by a means of making up for their shortcomings. Um, Example would be like the inferiority complex. So, you know, um, I an example would be like short man syndrome at the gym. Like a short man tends to overly exercise to overcompensate for, not being as tall as a taller person. The second principle would be subjective perceptions, and those are how each individual perceives their reality. These perceptions may or may not be fictional. So the person may be limited by their physical capabilities, or they may actually have the physical capabilities but think that they're limited. They could be actually very much capable. The next principle, third principle, is unity and self-consistency. This is where our conscience and our unconscious seek to be in balance but could be off. So basically, how well we are doing psychologically, emotionally, is a combination of how well our conscious and our subconscious are in line. Um, Conscious thoughts are those thoughts that the individual is aware of, and the whole person wants to be consistent with towards their end game or goal. But if that conflict may manifest psychologically, and this is called organ dialect, if like for some reason my conscious is not in line with my unconscious. The fourth principle is social interest. It's a community feeling. And there's a German term for it, which I will add in the text somewhere, here, wherever I can put it. And I actually called my German friend to see how I say it. And it's like German Schaffelts. And that's how he, termed it. A healthy person with social interests not only strives for their own success and superiority, but they also have a connection with their community. And that's why it was so difficult with his term that he had. It's very difficult to translate it into that overall feeling of feeling part of your humanity, oneness, connection with humanity. The fifth principle is style of life. This is your flavor of a person's life, and I like that they wrote flavor, your flair. Um, Also, what came to my mind is je ne sais quoi, which I was like, I don't even know what that means, so I had to actually look it up, and it's actually translated into I don't know what. So that's what that means. Like I don't know what means like that's you. So what's unique to you? So that's probably where I've heard that term before. So that's what makes you you. What makes the individual the individual, and that flair is the in the goals of how well that person knows themselves, their feelings for others, and how they feel about the world. So that can be like kind of formed by, all of these things, of course, are formed by our environment, our self. And the final principle number 6, is creative power. Ultimately, the individual or you are responsible for your final goal, your end game. And although you're a product of your environment, ultimately you're responsible. And the example that Adler used to effectively illustrate creative power was the small door situation. So, you'd use your creative power to perhaps bend down and go through the small door. That would be you using your power to get through obstacles in life. And that instantly made me think of Alice in Wonderland, um, in the little door. So that comes to my character, which the book that I chose, my literary character that I chose was Antonia, from My Antonia, and her Antonia Shimerda, which I don't know, I keep picking all these. I'm not even very good pronouncing different languages. I'm trying to learn Spanish for a really long time, and it's I can read it. I can read a lot of stuff, but once I'm trying to get it out of my mouth, it doesn't work out so well. That's why I tried to pick these videos to try to help me pronounce things a little bit better. But the Shemirders were a whole family that immigrated to this country, and the book takes place in like late 1800s, early 1900s, and it's about mostly the relationship. And after I actually kept reading it, I realized how much more it's actually about the character Jim Burton and the development of his character, but it's seeing Antonina through his eyes. And so there's a few things like she's definitely striving for success and superiority, and I think that that's what her one of her goals was. And so she was the only one in her family, this Bohemian family, that wanted to learn the language. And so her relationship develops with Jim, who's her childhood friend. They're both around like 10 and 12 when the book starts. And he's teaching her how to speak English. And they learn a lot from each other, and they just grow into this really, really strong friendship. Um, Jim's a really, really smart boy. Both of his parents die, and that's what starts where he's on a train ride to go live with his grandparents, who he didn't really know, and Antonia is the neighbors of the grandparents. So, and then throughout the development of their friendship, they start growing a really strong friendship. It's kind of about their little adventures in the beginning together and what they're learning from each other, and her talking about her old country. And her family doesn't really have much in this country, but they actually came from a lot in their old country. I think Bohemia was like, Ukraine somewhere. I was trying to try to figure out geographically where Bohemians came from, considered in the 1800s. But they pretty much called anybody from like that European, Russia, any of those they considered like, Bohemians. So, because there are Russians in the book too that the family really connects with. Well, continuing on directly on Antonia, Antonia also loses her father to suicide. So he never gets to develop the the farm the way that he wanted to. So his goals of immigrating to this country and making this prosperous farm for his children just became overwhelming. And so Antonia actually almost takes that goal of her father's onto herself. So in the meantime, Jim's very, very smart. Jim Burton, the character who's the narrator of the book, and he starts to go. He moves to a larger town, and starts doing schooling. And actually, Antonia gets a job. Somehow, his grandmother arranges it for her to, go becoming like a nanny to a family. And then she gets that's near the town, so her and Jim could, be closer to each other. So, her reality at that point is she knows that her mother's not very capable of taking care of the rest of her family. So she realizes, I want to, help my family. In reality, she starts realizing that immigrants aren't treated all that well, and then she realizes that the only thing she really could do is either the farm, get married to someone that can support her, or because she knows that they don't accept immigrants as like school teachers or scholars at that time, especially women and an immigrant. So um, her social interests, she gets really involved in dancing, and the family that she's nannying from doesn't really like that, but she feels like that's part of who she is. She has a very strong character, and that's what I totally love about her is she's soft and she's very caring of other people, but there's something very strong and blunt about it. So Jim at some point does profess his feelings for her, but she just tells him, keep doing your schooling, keep doing your schooling. And in the meantime, she kind of does what she has to do, and she ends up really like duped by a man that made her believe that he's going to take care of her, and he just leaves her pregnant. So she goes back to her farm to try to really work on it, and but she's very humbled by the experience. And during that time, someone stay hidden, but she was very proud of her baby, and she would just openly, admit she didn't flaunt it around. She just kind of wore plain clothes, things like that. But it was a few things. Then Jim and her just kind of lose contact for a bunch of years because he goes to Harvard, and then he goes back to visit her because she really made an impression on his life. And he goes to see her, and now she's married, so she finds another person that ends up taking care of her, and she ends up having like 11 kids, which she's very, very suited. And there's just one part in the book that I really want to say is that really just stood out to me. um, First, she's talking about that she lost a lot of her teeth because she's probably, she's older now at this point, and she says, I haven't got many left, but I feel just as young as I used to, and I can do as much work. And then Jim starts thinking about that. She keeps talking to him, but he keeps thinking about the teeth. And he says, I was thinking as I watched her how little it mattered about her teeth, for instance. I know so many women who have kept all the things that she had lost, but whose inner glow has faded. Antonia had not lost the fire of life. Her skin, so brown and hardened, had not looked like that flabbiness as the sap beneath it had been secretly drawn away. So even though she like now dedicated her life to hard work, there was still something about like life in her. And I think that really reflects Adler's theory about that we create our own goals and end game with our creative power. And I think that my character truly did that with a lot of the hardships that she faced. And I think that's why characters like that stand out to me. And I think that's why Adler's theory, what he has is hope. So, despite things that happen, we still have free will and control over our end game.